In 2026, India is not asking the world for sympathy. India is sending a message. Our peace is not weakness and our patience is not permission. Because in the last year, India faced the kind of shock that forces a nation to evolve its doctrine fast. A mass casualty terror attack in Kashmir killed at least 26 tourists in April 2025, and India responded with Operation Sindoor, a calibrated military action targeting terror infrastructure across the border. So today I am going to explain India's National Security Doctrine in 2026 not as a textbook but as a doctrine in practice. And stay till the end because I am opening three loops right now. At the end, I'll give India's three terrorism red lines in 2026 very clearly. I'll explain deterrence in 60 seconds, the simplest model you will ever hear, and I'll reveal India's three-layer shield: border, homeland, and information. Now, let's start with the term of the day: doctrine. A doctrine is not a speech, a doctrine is not a slogan, a doctrine is a repeatable decision framework. It tells your enemies what you will not tolerate, and it tells your own system how you will respond consistently. India may not always publish a single doctrine document, but India's actions, statements, and preparedness measures in 2025 and 2026 reveal a clear doctrine in practice. And the biggest shift from 2025 to 2026 is this: from response after attack to prevention plus preparedness plus punishment on India's terms. Now, let's do a quick reality check. April 2022, 2025 terror attack in Pahalgam, Jammu and Kashmir, dozens of civilians killed at least 26. May 7, 2025, India announces Operation Sindoor, precision strike on terror camps. May 10, 2025, India and Pakistan DGMO agrees to stop firing and military action across land, air and sea from 1700 IST. Now, that sequence matters because it established what many in India describe as new normal. You attack India with terrorism, India will respond, but on India's timing, target selection, and escalation control. Government communications around this period repeatedly stressed zero tolerance and a refusal to separate terrorists from those who enable them. And by 2026, the doctrine is evolving further. Not only retaliation, but resilience, civil defense, air defense, misinformation control, critical infrastructure security. Now we go into the core pillars. To discuss red lines, we must define terms. First, asymmetric warfare. Asymmetric warfare is when an enemy avoids direct battle and instead attacks civilians, symbol, tourism, economy, and morale. Official Indian communication on Operation Sindoor framed it as a response to an evolving pattern of asymmetric warfare targeting civilians. Now, another key term: proxy war. A proxy war means a state uses non-state militants, logistics, and deniable networks to attack another country while pretending innocence. India's leadership has increasingly described cross-border terrorism in this framework. PM Modi referred to Pakistan's proxy war as a deliberate war strategy, and Defense Minister Rajnath Singh publicly described India's fight against terrorism as a part of national defense doctrine and aimed at rooting out hybrid and proxy warfare. What are India's terrorism red line in 2026? I'll give the final three red lines at the end as promised, but here's the doctrine logic. India's red lines are centered on mass casualty, attacks on civilians, attacks with cross-border sponsorships or directions, attacks on critical infrastructure and strategic assets. And the response is designed to be calibrated, precise, and escalatory only if needed. India's official statement about Operational Sindoor emphasized focused, measured, and non-escalatory action. Now let's talk about myth and reality. Myth is being strong, myth means always being loud. Reality is strategic strength is measured by outcomes like deterrence, prevention, and control escalation. India's message is: we don't want war, but we will not accept terrorism. PM Modi's address after the operation framed it in those terms. This era is not one of war, but it cannot be one of terrorism either. Zero tolerance is presented as a guarantee of a safer world. Now let's address the most emotionally charged part: Pakistan and proxy war, calmly, factually, and firmly. India's Western security challenge has a constant feature: cross-border terrorism and proxy networks. In 2025, after the Pahalgam attack, India blamed Pakistan-backed groups and the crisis escalated into major fighting before the May 10 ceasefire. Reuters later reported India's Home Minister said Indian forces killed 3 Pakistani nationals involved in the April attack, while Pakistan denied involvement and called for an independent probe. So yes, India and Pakistan narratives differ, but India's doctrine is built on India's security assessment. Now, the term of the day here is plausible deniability. Plausible deniability equals to we did not do it while enabling it. Proxy warfare survives on plausible deniability, where terrorists are treated as a non-state but training, funding, and sanctuaries exist. This is why India's messaging has hardened to no distinction between terrorists and their perpetrators. And in 2026, India's doctrine and practice is clearer. Ceasefires are tactical tools, but deterrence posture remains high. Rajnath Singh described the ceasefire as Pakistan being kept on probation based on behavior. Now, what this means for you? When proxy terrorism rises, it impacts travel confidence, tourism, jobs, investor sentiment, and national unity. This is why national security doctrine is not only for soldiers; it's for every citizen's stability. Now, let's shift to the borders because in 2026, India faces not one but two very different border theaters. Now, first, LOC and LAC. LOC is the heavily militarized line in Jammu and Kashmir between India and Pakistan. LAC is the de facto boundary line with China, still not mutually clarified everywhere. Now, India's deterrence approach differs because the threats differ. On the LOC side, the challenge is sub-conventional conflict, infiltration, terror launches, and escalation control between nuclear-armed neighbors. The 2025 crisis showed how quickly things can escalate and why a clear doctrine is needed. Now, on China front, the conflict is not a terror, it's a territorial pressure, petrol friction, and long-term strategic competition. In June 2025, Reuters reported Defense Minister Rajnath Singh urged China to work toward a permanent solution for the border dispute, noting the need for a roadmap and trust building after 2020. There were also continued talks and mechanism. Reporting noted Corps commander level talks resumed in late 25 to maintain peace and stability along the LAC. And in early January 2026, Reuters reported India is considering easing restriction imposed in 2020 on Chinese firms bidding for government contracts, showing how India is weighing economic needs against security concerns and amid improving ties. That's core doctrine point. National security is not only about troops, it's also about supply chain, infrastructure, and strategic dependence. Now, there's one myth. If there are talks, the border problem is over. But the reality is, talks manages friction and capability changes reality. India's doctrine on the LSE is keep channels open to prevent accident, but build infrastructure readiness and long-term leverage. Now, the core concept that ties terror and borders together, deterrence. And as promised, deterrence 60 seconds. Here's the simplest explanation. Deterrence means making the cost of attacking you higher than the benefit. There are two types. Deterrence by denial. You make it hard for enemy to succeed. Example, strong border grids, intelligence, air defense, and cyber security. And deterrence by punishment. You make sure that if they attack, they pay a price. Example, calibrated military response against terror infrastructures. India's Operation Sindhu's messaging fits this logic. Measured, precise action aimed at terror camps without uncontrolled escalation. And India's defense leadership framed it as part of broader doctrine against hybrid and proxy threats. Now, what is escalation ladder? In real security planning, responses must be calibrated because escalation has steps and smart states control those steps. That's what India attempted in 2025. Punish terror infrastructure while messaging restraint to avoid wider war. Now, deterrence is not only weapons, deterrence is also resilience, and that brings us to the three-layer shield. Layer 1, the border shield. Better surveillance, patrol readiness, and infrastructure, stable border mechanism, and capacity growth. Layer 2, the homeland shield. This is where 2026 is different. After Operation Sindur, India's leadership repeatedly emphasized that preparedness cannot be one off. PM Modi reportedly said Operation Sindur should not be treated as a one-time initiative and called for institutionalizing civil defense preparedness. And the Indian Express reported that after the operation, PM Modi chaired a high-level meeting focused on coordination, civil defense mechanism, countering misinformation, fake news, and protecting critical infrastructure. That's doctrine evolution. Not only strike back, but stay ready. Layer 3, the information shield. Because in 2026, wars are fought in minds as much as on maps. Disinformation, fake videos, panic messaging, this can damage national stability. So India's doctrine increasingly treats misinformation control and critical infrastructure protection as national security functions. So what this means for you? The three simple citizen moves that strengthen national security. First, don't amplify unverified crisis content. Second, treat civil defense drills seriously. Practice build calm. Third, support armed forces by supporting social unity. This is not a propaganda, this is resilience. Now let's talk about how other countries impact India's doctrine. Pakistan regional moves. In January 2026, Reuters reported Pakistan was discussing a defense pact with Bangladesh, including a possible sale of JF-17 fighter jets, reflecting shifting regional alignments after political change in Dhaka. For India, this is not a reason for panic, it's a reason for vigilance because regional military ties can alter the security environment. Now, Afghanistan terrorism spillovers. AP reported Pakistan and China called for visible and verifiable action against Afghan-based terror groups, showing the region's militant ecosystem continues to affect state security planning. India's doctrine must account for spillovers, radical networks, and cross-border movement. Now, competition plus contact with China. India engages China diplomatically but cannot ignore the structural competition and border realities, hence the continued push for a durable border framework. So, the strategic logic is talk where you must, build capability where you must, deter where you must. Now, if India wants this doctrine to produce peace, not just power, here are five must do actions. First, strengthen counter-terror intelligence and rapid response. Second, sustain border infrastructure and surveillance growth. Third, build integrated air defense and drone countermeasures. Fourth, institutionalize civil defense and crisis readiness. Five, win the information war without harming democracy. Now, time to close the biggest open loop. India's three terrorism red lines in 2026. Here they are clear, practical, and consistent with India's stated posture. First, mass casualty attacks on civilians. If civilians are targeted at a scale, India treat it as a strategic attack, not a law and order issue. This is the lesson of 2025. Second, cross-border sponsored or enabled terrorism. India's posture increasingly asserts there will be no distinction between terrorists and those who enable them. 3. Attacks on critical infrastructure and strategic assets. Because modern war can begin with drones, sabotage, cyber disruptions, and panic, not just bullets. That's why civil defense, misinformation control, and infrastructure security are now part of national security planning. So, what's India's national security doctrine in 2026? Zero tolerance for terrorism, deterrence by denial, plus deterrence by punishment, resilience across border, homeland, and information space. India's goal is not conflict. India's goal is to make conflict unattractive for those who threaten us. This is what deterrence is. If you want part 2 in this series, comment what you want next. India China 2026, India EU trade and security, cyber plus AI warfare, or de-dollarization in economic security. Like, subscribe, and share if you like this video because informed citizens are part of national strength. Jai Hind, thanks for watching this one. See you in the next one.